You're watching the GI at E3 Newscast. This is Monday. We are covering some of the big news over the weekend. Joining me today is, I am not Chris Tring, as you may have noticed. I am James Batchelor. I am Editor-in-Chief of GamesIndustry.biz. Chris is busy working on various exclusive coverage, which you'll be able to find on the site. So joining me today is Marie D'Alessandri, who is our Academy writer. Marie, how are you doing?
I'm all right, tired. It's E3, so I'm tired.
How are you holding up after the weekend?
Yeah, no, I'm all right. I'm all right. We're kind of lucky this year that there's nothing at like crazy hours for the UK, so there's nothing at like midnight or 2 a.m. So
Yeah.
it's all right.
Has to be said, as much as it feels like there's something missing by Sony not being here,
Yeah.
I am not missing having to be up at 2 a.m.
Yep.
for the Sony conference. And joining us, our special industry guest today is Cassia Curran of Wings Interactive. Cassia, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me.
How are you?
I am doing fine. It is Monday morning.
It is Monday morning, yes. we're all feeling the Mondays. Brought you on because it's always good to kind of get good different perspectives on E3. You've got a kind of very different kind of approach to E3. You were telling us just before we recorded, like of how you go. Would like to just tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, I was a little bit like disconcerted when you reached out to me about being on this podcast because I've never quite got the point of E3, if I'm going to be completely honest. So I've always approached E3 from my business. My background is business development. So I've done business development in the games industry for many years. Sometimes a Chinese publisher, sometimes a UK company, looking sometimes for mobile games or PC or console games to publish, and I've always just generally thought of E3 as the conference that happens conveniently after GDC, so you can see how the deals with American game developers are going. I have never really sat down and properly watched like all the E3 showcases at once, and I'm always just like catching up after the things have happened, seeing if there's anything interesting that's catching my eye, just kind of thinking also from like a business point of view, seeing like how the major companies are changing potentially their strategy, or there's a doubling down on certain strategies. But yeah, I have to say, like, I'm not someone like the press who are all, where E3 is like one of the biggest things of the year. I have quite often opted out of E3 and I've quite often gone to Los Angeles to attend E3, but not actually bought a ticket or bothered to go inside, and just had meetings back to back at JW Marriott all day. So
Nice.
So yeah, I have a definitely different perspective, very much like business orientated, and nothing particularly like so maybe you could actually describe to me, James, what's the point for you for E3?
I mean, I've only ever done one E3, so for me, E3 is always just that collection of live streamed presentations crammed into the course of a week where, hey, here are all the big new exciting games. It's the point where kind of I, as a gamer, get really excited about what's coming out. And as you say, kind of really interesting seeing like the different companies and what their strategies are. I mean, we saw that really clearly with Xbox last night. I mean, we've known for years that they're really concentrating on Xbox Game Pass. Concentrating on Game Pass. But last night it's like 30 game reveals, and 27 of them are going to be on Game Pass, and most of those are day one on Game Pass. Like that strategy's really coming to fruition now.
Yes,
and you're really starting to see the investment they've put into it.
Yes, I mean, Games Pass is definitely the best bargain in the games industry, like hands down, for any consumer. Like, and you can see why Microsoft are particularly looking at Games Pass as being their key differentiator compared to the other major gaming companies as well.
Massively.
It's really interesting to see some of the bigger titles as well to be going on Game Pass, because for a while Game Pass was maybe mostly smaller titles, but now it's day and date for really the big things. Like, I can't remember all of them, but some of the big Xbox announcements are going to be on Game Pass, and I find that super exciting as a non-Xbox person who happens to have an Xbox because my partner has one, but I've never had any like a lot of incentive to play. But what they showed last night really got me thinking about, maybe I'm going to start that Xbox Series X after all, after everything they announced and Game Pass.
Yeah, I'm now thinking I now have to buy a Xbox console.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, I've always been much more of a PlayStation kind of player, but Xbox Game Pass is just such a good bargain, and there are so many good games coming out that it seems more and more necessary. It's very, very bad for our wallets, but there's so many great games.
Yeah.
This is another thing about E3, which I find a little bit hard to almost like take in, is just there's so many games coming out, it gets a bit overwhelming.
Completely.
So that's why I tend to I don't watch the showcases. I just read like the recaps, and then I'll watch the trailers for the ones that catch my eye. And I'm like, oh, Redfall maybe like seems like something I will get. But at the same time, I'm only going to play these big games if either if they're really, really popular and I want to see what it's about, or if it's got really, really good reviews. And it's not just seeing like a shiny trailer. There's so many shiny trailers.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait until they actually come out to get excited.
While we're on shiny trailers, if you haven't already, you absolutely need to watch the shiny trailer for The Outer Worlds 2.
Yeah.
Have you seen that one yet?
Okay. I haven't actually seen that. Is it worth watching then?
It is absolutely worth watching. I mean, it's very trailerish, but all I will say is like that is how trailers should be. That is how honest trailers should be going forward.
Okay.
It is superb.
It's a comic one, right? So that should be fun.
It's definitely worth watching. So how much have you caught up on this morning from Xbox and Square Enix last night? Because those have been the big ones over the course of Sunday. We had the Xbox Bethesda showcase. It was followed shortly by Square. The PC gaming show was like last night, but I think PC is, in the grand scheme of things, a smaller market, obviously compared to mobile, but slightly smaller than console. So the PC gaming show never seems to bring out as many massive headlines, industry attention grabbing headlines as Xbox, for example. So how much did you catch up on?
I to be honest, I'm more interested on the indie side personally. Actually, being completely honest here, the one game that that was announced this weekend that I was instantly like, okay, I will buy that no matter what, is like a tiny indie game called Yokai, which is essentially, as I can gather, you're basically being managing the demon house in Spirited Away, like a Studio Ghibli kind of management game. Oh my god, yes, totally. Like I'm there. I have no idea whether it's actually going to be any good, but I'm just like, I just love the concept, and I would just like throw money at this game.
Yeah, same. I mean, I don't even know what it is at this point, just what you just said, but that sounds amazing. When was that announced?
That was a part of the Wholesome Games.
Oh no, I watched it and I don't remember.
I need to go back and watch it.
It was definitely one of the lists, and I was a bit like, okay, just throwing my money at that one. And also there was a really good one which was about tea.
Yes, what is it
called? Pico.
Yeah.
That's also, I'm sorry, just take my money.
Yeah,
100%. I feel a bit bad for Xbox and Bethesda. At this point, it's a bit like they come out with this like amazing stuff with like Halo Infinite and Starfield, etc. And I'm just like, no, give me the cats with tea, thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm the same. I got really excited about Xbox, which is not something I expected, but on paper, I am definitely more like you, more interesting into the tinies.
Yeah, they're able to take risks and like try something different in a way that I think these big companies, they're having to, because it costs so much to develop these games, they want to de-risk their investment by doubling down on like proven gameplay mechanics, by building up on like already established franchises. So it's a little bit harder for them to really go nuts with like very like offbeat or crazy ideas and thoughts. So like, for example, having a look at like Party Animals, that's very much like AAA version of Gang Beasts, right? So you can sort of I probably know the corporate person who sat down and did the analysis for that and worked out that this is probably a good idea. Green lighted this one. Yeah.
You watch that trailer and you just know there has been a meeting. It's like, right, Gang Beasts and Human Fall Flat but with animals. Do
Yes,
it. That was the entire pitch.
Very high production
So, yeah.
values, and then we'll throw loads of marketing budget behind it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's going to work. And I'm sure it's going to, like, I was
fun.
well into it when that trailer got on. I was like, oh yeah, I'd play it. And yeah, sure. But you can instantly see the influences and see, as you said, that discussion that went on probably and how they got to the place they got, like, that's for sure.
I definitely think that as well with, I think what's really interesting about like the Wholesome Games Showcase, or just like the whole presence of Wholesome Games per se, is that there's obviously like this consumer demand for these sort of non-violent games, but the AAA, the big companies, they're very much established in like games about killing things no matter what, or violence, or like fights, even if it's party animals, like little cute animals fighting each other, like that kind of conflict sort of focused games. Whereas like there's so many different ways to actually create games which are nothing about, not at all about conflict, about or like physical conflict and violence. So I find that that's kind of actually pushing things forward in the games industry in the most interesting way now.
See, this is where I get my obligatory plug in.
I was waiting
you were
for
waiting
it.
for it. You were waiting for it. So I do in my spare time. I do a blog, Non-Violent Game of the Day.
Oh yes.
Which is a little Twitter account, and it's kind of basically it's wholesome games, but without the discipline, dedication, and budget. That's basically what it is. But yeah, I make notes like as it's going along, and kind of what games I can cover. And I'm planning. I did this for E3 2019. I'm planning to do it again for this year. Like on GI, I did an analysis of how many games were shown that are violent versus non-violent, and that boils right down to not like excessively violent, so all the hack and slashy gory ones. I mean, even things like party animals I would count as violent, because the object of the game is to inflict violence, no matter how cartoony it is. And looking at what's been shown so far, and bear with me while I consult my spreadsheet, which is handily open in another tab. So far, we have only seen, well, I clarify, I haven't made notes for like any of Wholesome Direct or Guerrilla Collective or Devolver. Like, this is primarily like the big showcases, so Kickoff Live, Xbox, etc., PC Gaming Show, like things like 28 games so far are non-violent out of potentially over 100. So like that's it's not a massive proportion. Like you look at some of these showcases, so Square Enix in particular, like there was some of the stuff there looked fun. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy game looks great fun, and that has my attention. But watching through the rest of it is like, and if you just kind of detach, like, right, what am I actually doing here? What is the loop? What is going to get players engaged here? It's like Guardians of the Galaxy, most of that will be shooting aliens and things, and yes, there'll be some fun conversational bits, but then it's mostly shooting aliens. And then Babylon's Fall is a party of characters hacking and slashing their way through monsters in a dungeon. And then Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, is a party of characters hacking and slashing their way through monsters in a dungeon, building on those franchises that are known for hacking and slashing through. And it's just, there wasn't a great deal of variety. Kind of Ubisoft as well. Like we didn't say a great deal about Ubisoft's lineup in the previous newscast, because honestly I didn't have much to say about it, because most of it was, here's a game where you shoot things, and here's a game where you shoot other things, and okay, there was like an extreme sports title and Mario Rabbids, but even Mario is now shooting things. Like it's this not obsession, that's too strong a word, but this focus on combat, it can paint a very kind of one-sided picture of our industry. And the thing is, like, E3, as we've said in previous years, and certainly on previous podcasts, like E3 is that window for the rest of the world into what the video games industry is going on. Case in point, my dad is downstairs looking after my children, and he was saying, like, how's work going? It's like, oh yeah, it's E3 this week. Oh yeah, I saw something about that on the news this morning. Yeah, it's all the big video. Even my dad, who is completely unaware of any video games existing outside of Microsoft Flight Simulator, is aware of E3. And yet, if you were to look at it from an outsider's perspective, a lot of it is various forms of digital killing. And yeah, the indie showcases, like, you get a much more variety of that. So it's kind of a shame those aren't a bit more prominent.
It's ironic, but unfortunately, violence is the safe option. for the games industry, for game developers. Like this is kind of tried and true, makes lots of sales. There's a whole vocabulary that's been built around like shooting people or shooting things in the most satisfying way, and it's relatively easy to replicate.
I can never remember.
I did think. Sorry. No, I did think that the Xbox showcase in particular had a lot of shooters, and as a person who doesn't necessarily enjoy shooters, like, I mean, unless it's The Last of Us or Uncharted, these are the two series where you shoot things that I've enjoyed in my life, and generally all the rest is not for me, essentially. And I thought that it was quite overwhelming that a wide majority of the games shown at Xbox were shooters, like almost all of them. No, maybe not all of them, but as a result, they're all merging into one in my head. There was a shooter in the what is the title? I don't know. There was just so many of them, but some of them do look like. I do remember Stalker 2. I thought that trailer was really well put together, but apart from that one. Like it's just a bit too much, and like I was a bit sad that Xbox this year didn't have a dedicated space for indies, actually, because typically they would do that sort of like lots of clips of different indie games. Unfortunately, that means they don't have the spotlight they deserve as much, because it's usually very short segments. But that was a bit lacking. I think they could have put a better emphasis on indies. That would have been nice, because the Wholesome Games show I thought was very intense and dense, and I was covering it with our news editor Danielle, and we were trying to take notes of everything. It was so fast, like just a few seconds per announcements, and it was really difficult to keep track of everything. And as a result, same result with many games just merging into one in my head. But yeah, anyway, too many guns, more caps, less guns, please.
I do find myself with some of the. Certainly with some of the stuff that was like during Xbox or Square Enix or Ubisoft, like, and this is kind of personal taste, and it's kind of hard. It's hard not to separate your personal taste from what you're covering for work.
It's impossible, I think.
But I find myself like some of them, like, you know, some of the demos just completely tuning out and just waiting for the next thing to start. Because I personally have no interest in this game. I have already got a sense of what this game is. Case in point would have been Rainbow Six Extraction. That game does not appeal to me at all. I can see why it appeals to others. Maybe, but like there was a good 15, maybe 20, but like it was a good 10-15 minutes on the real ins and outs of how you will be killing the zombie aliens. And I was like, I just kind of, my mind just and my mind just drifted, like and it doesn't. Marie, you kind of make a really good point, is the lack of indies and those kind of more riskier titles at things like the Xbox in particular. Like it struck out to me when one of them, I want to say Phil, someone from Xbox started the showcase like, we've got 30 titles for you tonight, 27 of which are coming to Game Pass. And we're like, right, if there's only 30, that means there is no indie montage, because usually they're like, we've got 75 titles for you this week, this year's E3, and like 50 of them are crammed into this idea Xbox montage. But within those, you get some really interesting games. And then last night, that I think that's what made last night's showcase ever so slightly less interesting. And kind of as much as Wholesome Games, it's great that Wholesome Games exists, and Guerrilla Collective and Devolver Digital. And with I'm rambling, and I am building to a point, I promise. With E3 being digital this year, and there being fewer physical showcases, we're seeing a more digital one. So like there are more separate events this year than there are of any other previous E3. And it means that these indie games get their event, an event of their own. But those events aren't getting the attention that they perhaps deserve, or those titles might not be getting the attention they would get during, say, an Xbox. Case in point, we were talking in the Team Slack yesterday, and I believe during Wholesome Direct, 9,000 people were watching it on YouTube. 29,000 people at the same time, at that same moment in time, were waiting for the E3 stream to start. So nothing is happening on the E3 stream, which was obviously going to start with Xbox. But and that's personally disappointing, because I'd love for the world and the industry to recognize how much more varied video games can be. And stuff like Wholesome Direct really shows how varied it can be, how many different gameplay mechanics and core loops there are beyond make the thing dead.
Yeah, I'm just generally playing indie games these days because once you've played like that, Ubisoft open world AAA game, like they kind of get a bit similar. Like I just don't have those kind of like new interesting experiences happen so much with AAA games than I do with indie. Like there's so much imagination, so much like creativity coming out with all these indie games, and they're genuinely exciting in a way that I'm like, oh, it's another multiplayer shooter that I will like suck at and probably be abused upon if I ever try playing it because I will suck. So I've like.
Yeah, it's great. I feel like Animal Crossing as well, being so successful last year, has really opened the door for more chill games as well, which I very much welcome as well. And yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's a bit of a shame though that now, because like there's a bunch of people who are really disliking the term wholesome for some reason, and like I don't understand how people manage to create controversies on nice things like that. And like we have this really cool thing happening where tons of very creative and interesting games are coming out, and somehow there are some people who are unhappy about that and about the term that's being used, and that is beyond my understanding. I think I don't get why that could ever be a bad thing, and also if you don't like the word, just don't use it. But that's fine. Like I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one.
I think it's just a useful shorthand. I think there's always going to be this kind of critique or discourse about how like violence or non-violence sort of it takes place within like our cultural areas in society. So I think that the wholesome curators are doing a fantastic job with sort of dealing with that kind of critique, etc. I think that the sort of kind of critiques of wholesome games could be valid in some respects, in that there is such things as like toxic positivity when saying things are positive, but this is not really the case with the way the wholesome games is run. And I think generally it's just a really, really positive force for the games industry. And I'm like, consumers, please watch more, please like buy all these games, because I'm certainly just so down for it.
Definitely. What I'd love is like obviously not to look too far ahead, but like E3 next year, I'd love there still to be Wholesome Direct, Guerrilla Collective, all these kind of indie focused events around E3, because indies are never going to be able to afford like a booth. Even the Wholesome Games team are never going to be able to afford a booth at the E3 show to kind of show off all the games in their showcase. It's just economically, it's not practical. But
and it doesn't really give you that much in return, I think.
No.
We sort of do sometimes for indies to attend this, that, another, and show their games off at game shows, and it never really moves the needles from a sort of marketing perspective. It's maybe useful for the game developers to attend and then watch other people play their games, but then you can still get play testers. Like I just don't think it's particularly valuable, except for having fun going to a game show.
I think that's super interesting, because I've definitely seen a few developers and small publishers as well who've been telling me the same thing as you just explained, that actually maybe going to physical shows is not necessarily that important anymore. I don't know if important is quite the right word, but there's many things now you can do that can bring you a lot of traffic, I guess, on your Steam page. For instance, like demos are a thing that some people have told me, like that's if I have a demo, that sometimes is as useful as having a booth at a show or something. I find that quite interesting, that maybe physical presence at events might not be such a big thing anymore.
Oh yeah, it's much more valuable to get your game onto a promotional event on Steam than it is to get your game like shown in front of people at some sort of game show. The good thing about game shows for indies is like the networking and the parties, I guess. But then I almost like the positive part of the pandemic is that it kind of has flattened the playing field for indies from developing countries who couldn't afford to go to these big game shows, etc. And given them a bit more opportunity that European or North American dev already had. But but yeah, I think that it's very much diminishing in terms of returns for indie game developers to attend these kind of events sometimes.
Yeah, I know indie publishers who over the last year have not attended any events because there haven't been any, and have been like, it has made no difference to my business at all.
Yeah.
I can now not go to events and still sell my games and still reach the people I need to reach. Going back to the point that Marie made, like the demos, like kind of credit to Xbox in this regard. Like, so I believe they've confirmed that they're going to do another ID Xbox Demo Fest towards the end of the week. I think it kicks off tomorrow, in fact. So for a week, you will be able to download demos of the indie games that they've been shown off over the past week, or that are particularly prominent coming up from ID Xbox. And like, the demos are only available for a week. I'm still not clear as to whether that means that after a week they just delete themselves off your hard drive or you can't play them. But the idea that I think is a great thing, and I'd love to see that more with E3 in general going forward. Is all right, here's this cool game we've just shown you a trailer for, and here's a demo of it. So try it. Like, we all kind of watch these trailers and gameplay demonstrations and think, yes, I know how that plays, but actually to get hands-on experience. And like, we're in this kind of very kind of digital world where you can do that. Here's a new indie game. Here's a cool new wholesome non-violent indie game, and you can try it now on your Xbox. Like, that's a cool thing that we can do, and I'd love to see that more going forward.
Sometimes I think with demos, it really the impact of having a demo really varies depending on the kind of game it is. Like, sometimes if you have a demo, depending on your sort of game, like some players will just be like happy with the demo and won't actually bother to buy the whole game itself. And it kind of like having a demo, it kind of incentivizes you as a developer to sort of embed some sort of game mechanic hooks that really like try to get you addicted to the gameplay, or try and leave it as a cliffhanger, like just to ensure that after playing the demo the player will actually want to buy the whole thing. So it varies a lot, but yeah, demos thoughtfully done can be like a good thing for sure for both players and for developers.
Yeah, no, that's true. To be fair, I'm thinking of past demos that I'd played to death but never bought the actual game. So yeah, but still, like, I think just the ability to kind of try new games, and again, kind of Game Pass ties in with that. Like, you can just download, if you're subscribed, you can just download it, have a go, because the upfront cost of video games is now increasing, and I think that's why we're seeing, it's all part of like why we're seeing such homogeneity across, like, the big E3 games they're all like high budget, very polished, violence driven. More often than not, they're multiplayer or they're service games, because that's what sells. That's what people know they can spend $60, now $70 on, and know they will enjoy. As much as you said about like Ubisoft open world games, like you once you've played them, you've kind of played them all. It's like that too, and that works the other way. It's like, once you've played one, you're going to enjoy. I know I'm going to enjoy Far Cry 5 because I enjoyed all, Far Cry 6, sorry, because I've enjoyed all the previous ones. So I know that is a safe bet regardless of what they show or not. But when it comes to something new, something original, something a bit more risky, even I have to confess, like, I'm like, I love the look of that, but I don't know if I can justify, because I've done it. I've bought games, I've spent 5, 10, 15 quid on indie games thinking, this looks really good and I want to support the developer. I've played it for an hour and I was like, this is not quite what I thought it was going to be. It's not quite my thing. And that feels like money wasted, which is a horrible thing to say, but you know what I mean?
So I think this is actually Game Pass has a really fantastic impact upon consumers, because they can just try so many different new types of games. And I've heard great things from indie game developers saying that actually getting their game their game onto Xbox Game Pass has increased their sales elsewhere, because more people have just tried their game, which they maybe wouldn't have already, and then liked the game and then told their friends about it, and all bought their game on the other consoles they have, or the other platforms that they prefer perhaps, or whatever. So it's for indies, I think the in the short term at least, Game Pass is fantastic. And I wonder, like in the long run, if this kind of, if the Game Pass becomes super dominant over all other forms of subscriptions in the games industry, then Microsoft will be in the really, really strong position and be able to have somewhat like monopolistic power. But that would be in the future.
Yeah.
I personally find Game Pass a bit overwhelming, I'll be honest, like, because as I mentioned earlier, I do have an Xbox, but I don't use it. And the thing is, like, I'm interested in Game Pass for the day and date releases of like some of the big games they announced, for instance, because that means I don't have to pay 60 quid for a new game if it's on Game Pass and it's part of my subscription. But when it comes to smaller titles, or even like what's the word I'm looking for? Back catalog of Xbox games or games in general, I just look at all this library and I'm like, there's just too many choices and I end up not playing anything. So I'd rather like pick and choose the things I'm playing on other platforms, even if that means I have to pay for them. I mean, no, obviously if it's free on Game Pass, I should probably do that, but I just find it a bit overwhelming. But it is, yeah. I think, yeah, it's definitely a chance for indies in the short term. But I'm wondering and worrying about what it means in the long term for everyone in the industry, really, that sort of new model emerging.
I don't think we know, and I don't think we're going to find out for many years to come. Like, we still don't know, like, in the ins and outs of the deals that Microsoft are making to get titles on it, on their service. So, we don't know how. I mean, the presumption obviously is that they're paying large sums of money to indies. Say, here, this will offset any sales you might have got. But we don't know how much those are. We don't know how much, like, the indies were expecting. So, and as much as the indie games are on there, we don't really have any statistics as to how much they're being played. Like, that's not often something that's announced. Like, and there's the difference of downloads versus played. Like, I'm one of those people that's guilty of, like, download a ton of indie games or interesting titles that I'm really interested in on Xbox, and then never get round to playing them, and then they either expire or I delete them to make room for something else. Like, it's a tough one.
I couldn't possibly comment. There's all I have to say about that. But yeah, it's definitely. I think it's a definitely like one to watch as Xbox Game Pass going forward. I think from an industry dynamics point of view, that's going to be the most interesting. And just generally, E3 over the last few days. Is there anything like that you're looking forward to tomorrow? I'm wondering.
Yes. All
Nintendo.
The things, because Nintendo is the one thing I've been waiting for. Like, it's just, I was saying last night to a friend, like, we were just chatting about how it felt like there wasn't any wow moment for me so far, and for them too, during the showcase. But that's just because Nintendo hasn't happened yet, as far as I'm concerned. I've had a lot of things I've loved in the Devolver showcase, and in the Wholesome games, and even in Xbox and Ubisoft, I'm not sure. But for me, it's just going to be Nintendo. I'm just looking forward to seeing, I don't know, whatever weird indie things they're supporting, and also Breath of the Wild 2. Thank you very much.
Yes, I have hopes for Nintendo. I'm a massive fan of Nintendo, and I think that they are really capable of coming up with like very interesting, exciting, innovative new titles. They really are not afraid to try something different.
No.
And I have massive respect for that company.
Yeah.
I always think Nintendo makes a great kind of finale to E3. Like, I know that technically, if you look at the E3 schedule, there are other sessions afterwards. But in terms of like big names, Nintendo's the last one, and they always take that kind of that Tuesday slot. So they are the last big companies to go, and it always just feels like it draws a line under each E3 nicely. Because, like, as we're kind of saying, like, most of the showcases, most of the AAA showcases, various different forms of guns and killing and multiplayer and live service and AAA and polish and large games that very much appeal to the same audience. Like, all different titles that are vying for the same audience, same money. And then you get to Nintendo, and Nintendo have some of that, and and Nintendo have been appealing to the same audience since they first got into consoles. Like, they're still rolling, depending heavily on things like Mario and Zelda and so forth to kind of keep people's attention. And those series, with the exception of Breath of the Wild, obviously haven't changed too dramatically over the decades. But equally, I think, like, after 3 or 4 days of titles that are primarily aimed at that typical 18 to 34-year-old male, 16 to 34-year-old male, to then have that last showcase of here's a selection of games where there will be something for everyone. There will be something for your 16 to 34-year-old male that doesn't mind playing something with more than 4 colors. There will be something for grandmas. There will be something for children. There will be a good range, and there will be some of the kind of the action stuff. There'll be some, certainly they're getting better relationships with third parties over the last few years, and particularly now that Switch is so popular, so best selling. But you get that mix of Nintendo stuff and indie stuff and some third party stuff, and it's always just kind of a good kind of snapshot of the sort of games that a lot of people want to play.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yep. I can't wait for Nintendo. I hope it's going to be good. I hope we won't be disappointed, but I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm still not, we were all gearing up for that Switch Pro announcement that never happened. So I'm now just holding my breath for tomorrow.
I mean, I'm not too upset about the Switch Pro announcement not being a thing. I just want Nintendo games. Like, I love my Switch as it is. I don't need a Pro.
that is the thing. That is the thing. Like, tomorrow, even if Breath of the Wild doesn't show up, Breath of the Wild 2 doesn't show up, you still get Nintendo games. That's the one where you can never be disappointed by Nintendo is you will get Nintendo games.
Yeah. Even if it's just remakes of Zeldas, I'm fine. Just give them to me.
Agree. Yeah, I will play all the remakes of Zelda games. Yep, totally. Fine. Yep.
That is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to be back tomorrow with a special industry guest just after Nintendo, so expect a lot of Nintendo talk tomorrow. And Marie will probably get you on for that then.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll be there then.
It sounds like you might have a few things to say. Cassia, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. It's lots of fun.
No worries. You can find all our E3 coverage at GamesIndustry.biz. You can find the rest of our GI E3 newscasts on our YouTube channel, and there are podcast versions as well. So if you've got all the way through this and you think, I want to do that again while I'm going for a walk or a run or I'm driving, then you can download this episode just all over again on audio, and that will be on the podcasting platform of your choice. That's it. We're done until tomorrow. Plenty of stuff to be covering, so we should probably get going. Thank you so much for joining us.